Today's episode is brought to you by Tyrant Books, publisher of the novel Vincent and Alice by Shane Jones, the visionary author of Lightboxes. Vincent and Alice is a mind-bending office comedy and a touching modern love story set against the backdrop of an ever-increasingly disorienting America. Vincent and Alice by Shane Jones, out there now from Tyrant Books.
You are not alone. You have found other people.
You and I have a friend in common.
Every stupid thing that a writer could do, I've done.
I think it's really beautiful.
What a struggle, you know?
I can't believe the speed of this woman in leopard print running through the airport. The way in which I get choked up.
And now here's your host, Brad Listi.
Just one person.
Hello, hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Other People podcast. I'm Brad Listi here in Los Angeles, California. It is August, dog days of summer. We're in the thick of it. The ice caps are melting. Have you seen this news about Greenland? This huge, terrifying melting that's happening up there? Like billions of gallons of water in a day. I don't know, or billions of gallons of ice melted. You know what I'm saying. Is it gallons of ice? You know what I mean. It's hot. Sarah Rose Etter is my guest. Her debut novel is called The Book of X. It's available from $2 Radio. Perhaps you have heard of it. It has been generating a lot of buzz. People are talking about The Book of X by Sarah Rose Etter, and I was lucky enough to get her to come talk to me when she was on tour and stopped over in Los Angeles. So, great conversation with her. That's coming up here in a second. I got a letter from a listener named Luke who says, "Hey Brad, I'm intrigued by your offhand mention of selling a TV show. Have we listeners ever gotten a full account of your, quote, Hollywood period? Why are you holding out on us? Please dish. Your fan, Luke." I mean, it's a little bit of an overstatement to say that I ever had a Hollywood period, though I guess I kind of did. And my success in Hollywood is of the very middling variety. It's nothing to write home about. But, like, with that in mind, I do feel a sense of pride in having gotten through those hoops and sold a thing, just because it's such a pain in the ass, at least through my lens. To some people, it might be no big deal. But for me, taking all those meetings and having to do that dog and pony show and dealing with all of the insincerity and weirdness of Hollywood, it was really stressful. But at times exciting. Like it's kind of fun to be on the lot of a movie studio. There's a little bit of that. You get some excitement from that, which I would not deny. And it was fun to actually convert and get the yes and oh my God, these people like our show. They're gonna buy the show. Maybe this show's gonna be on TV. But then there was an executive shuffling. I thought it was gonna happen, and then there was an executive shuffling at MTV and everything went kaput, which happens. But it was no great success. I'm no great Hollywood insider or anything like that. But I did sell a TV show. I did make those rounds. I have had that experience. I've been on the water bottle tour. You just go to these meetings and it's like, do you want a bottle of water? And I'm always like, yeah, I'm taking the bottle of water every time, even if I'm not thirsty. I'm getting out of here with some water. Sparkling water? Really? Like flavored sparkling water? I'll take that. Sometimes they have that too. They have different offerings. I think it's important to take whatever they offer. But I've talked about this in bits and pieces. I think maybe the most extensive conversations I might have had around this were with Melissa Broder, who was my writing partner on the show. So I think episode 404 might be the one where we talk about it the most, or episode 519. Melissa Broder, of course, is the mastermind behind the So Sad Today Twitter feed. She's the author of The Pisces, the essay collection So Sad Today. She's got another book coming out. So we worked together and made those rounds. And I mean, it was like, I have fond memories in some ways. I love Melissa. We had some fun despite the shit show of trying to go through that process. And we did. We got there. It's not, at the point at which they decided not to do it, it was out of our hands. But they paid us, and I guess we got close. I don't even know what that means. And I think, in retrospect, like, I really wanted to sell the show and get it made because I need money. But I don't even watch TV. Like, I don't watch reality TV. I've seen like 5 or 10 episodes of The Simpsons, 5 or 10 episodes of Seinfeld. Like, all these shows that are cultural touchstones. I might have seen, and I might have actually sat through an episode of South Park twice. Not that these shows are the end-all be-all. I mean, I do watch Homeland. I watched all of Game of Thrones. Like, there are some shows that, get their hooks into me for whatever reason. But I'm far from like the dude who knows every TV show and knows every movie and every line from every movie. This, despite the fact that I have a film degree, I think what I'm coming to grips with is that just temperamentally and constitutionally as a person, and this applies to literature, it applies to music, it applies to art, food, any enjoyable aspect of life. I'm just not capable of like obsessive enthusiasm to the degree that some people seem to be. And in particular, the kinds of people who tend to have the will to work through all of this nightmarish bullshit. It's the person who just burns to be a Hollywood success story and to like win an award and give that speech and, do the premieres. I don't care about that. As yeah, it would be nice, but like, I don't care enough I don't really care. And I think that's to my detriment. I think that was like, that's why I didn't continue. I sort of realized that and was like, you know what? I should leave this to people who really are into it. But there you go. I do like the idea of making a show that makes people laugh. That was always the point, I think that's a noble way to make a living, trying to make people laugh in this troubled world of ours. So I don't look down my nose at people who do that and do it well and are decent people. There are lots of decent people working in Hollywood. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush or oversimplify, but I don't know, man. It's well documented what a crazy business it is. By people inside and out. I mean, I don't think there's much argument. So I hope that explains it, Luke. I hope that gives you some further insight. I don't regret it. It was a good experience. Glad I did it. Got it out of my system. A lot of people don't get that far. We had agents, we had managers, we did all that stuff. It's a pain in the ass. Well, at least for us. Like, I guess maybe it's not a pain in the ass if, like, you're the child of a celebrity or something, or you went to one of these private high schools in Los Angeles and, like, your friend's dad, like, runs Sony or something. But for the average person, like, showing up and, like, trying to figure it out cold, it can be, quite a knot to untangle. And in large part, we untangled it. So appreciate you listening, Luke. Thanks for the letter. I hope that helps. If you want further information and possibly contradictions of what I just said, you can listen to those archived episodes with me and Melissa Broder. Maybe I had a different attitude when I talked to her. I don't think I did, but it's always possible. I contain multitudes. Who knows what I said? My guest today is Sarah Rose Etter. Her debut novel is called The Book of X. It is available from $2 Radio. And I had such a nice time with her. I'm excited to share this conversation. Here you go, folks. This is Sarah Rose Etter.
I never thought of it as a grotesque until Carmen called it that in her blurb. And then I went crazy and was just researching the entire history of the grotesque. And I realized I do have a lineage there, that this is 100% in that line. But I never set out to do that. I just set out to write this one story.
Isn't it nice when somebody tells you what you've done? It's like, oh my God, yes, I did.
Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it. I always try to own up to it, though. I'm like, I didn't know that's what I had done.
This podcast is a grotesque.
Is it really?
No, I don't know.
It might be. You should check it out. It could be.
It could be.
If you think about the definition of the grotesque, in most cases, in the early days, they were literally talking about it as bringing the dark into the light. So this podcast could potentially, if you think about going into the dark minds of writers, be a grotesque.
Or just like unearthing my own dark mind somehow.
Yeah, or everyone's dark minds.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. This is a grotesque thing.
It truly is.
So let's get into, I think, picking up bits and pieces, reading some interviews you did. This book's birth story, to me, is compelling. Why don't you start at the beginning? First of all, give us like the 30,000-foot view. How long did it take to write?
Yeah, I think we'd say about 5 years, 6 years. And I only noticed that because I was looking for something in my Google Drive, and I realized that I had a spreadsheet I had made about 6 years ago. And that was really just trying to think about how to link a bunch of different pieces together. And so I had started mapping stories against each other to see how they might fit.
What does that mean?
I was working with computer systems. I had a really nerdy tech job, and I was mapping the front ends of computer systems to the back end. And I started to think about a character who would have sort of a front end and a back end, a day-to-day life, and then it would be juxtaposed with this other life that was in her head. And so that was where the visions really came from and started. And so the work of that, it took a lot of organization. It's funny because it reads surreal, but it was very much a lot of structure before I ever started to write. I was really outlining each part and trying to take this commercial structure and force surrealism into it, if that makes sense.
So you use this spreadsheet, just so I can get a visual of this, for this book.
Yeah.
To map out each of the individual chapters, bits.
Yeah, that's how it started. And then I used a program called Scrivener.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's usually used, I think, for script writing, but I knew that I wanted to have a bunch of pieces, and I didn't know how to manage them all, right? Because when you start to get to scale 300 pages and you start moving things around and editing, there's so many bits and pieces that, to organize it and streamline it. Scrivener was a huge help.
Okay, so how did you, because I have Scrivener.
Yeah.
I've tried to use it, and I get like really excited about it. I'm like, oh, yeah. And then I sort of fall off. I'm like, I feel like there's too much to keep track of here.
Yeah.
How are you doing it? Is it like each individual bit has its own page, and they're all down that left side margin?
Yeah, so I had broken it up into 3 parts, and I mapped out every scene I wanted in each part, and I wrote them each on a note card. And every morning, I was in Iceland for a writing residency at the time, and every morning I would pull a card and write the scene. And Scrivener was awesome for that because I just had so many pieces. But when we initially laid the book out, $2 Radio came back and was like, this is 1,000 pages long. These pieces can't be on individual pages. And I was like, I guess you're right. I didn't write War and Peace. Like, we don't need to publish this as a giant tome. So then we came up with the format that you see today, which is, I think I like it because it kind of lends itself to the Twitter era, really. I mean, if you think about social media, our attention spans are so short. So you're hoping to hold on to people for as long as you can.
I've been in kind of a fatalist mood lately with regard to writing and reading. Not as much reading, but just like book world. Like just because I'm frustrated with my own book, which is just torturing me, and I don't have time because I'm working so hard.
Right.
So I'm just kind of like in a mood. And I was like, the other day, I was like, you know what? I like reading Twitter. Twitter's my favorite. Like I started getting like this reverse psychology thing going, and then I caught myself, and I'm like, what am I doing? I need to go on a vision quest.
Yeah, well, you actually bring up a good point that I've been thinking about a lot. It's like what was handed down to us from kind of academic writing is that you should put your ass in the chair and write a page every day. And when you look at where we are with capitalism now, I'm starting to ask the question, how is that possible? Because if you're not working 90 hours a week, then you have 5 jobs and you're driving Lyft, or you know what I mean? We're in a gig economy. And so I'm really starting to question, because I never would have written this book if I didn't take off a month and go sit with it for 30 days. It never would have happened.
Okay, so wait, we got to stop because I want to try to do this as chronologically as possible. The very, very, very beginning, how does this book begin for you?
Yeah, so the spreadsheet, and then I got the first line in my head, which is, I was born a knot like my mother and her mother before her. And that really just kicked around in my head for a long time.
A knot meaning like tied in a knot.
Like tied in a knot, yeah. And I think now, looking back on it, there are these sculptures Louise Bourgeois has done of these knotted women that are very beautiful, and I was really taken with. And I think subconsciously she might have been really influencing me. But then I applied for a bunch of writing residencies with the first pages of the project, and I kept getting waitlisted in America. And they were kind, they were nice, but because I have a full-time job, I couldn't really sit around and wait for a phone call and disrupt my life for a month. So when the offer came in from Iceland, I just said, fuck it, like this is what I want to do. And my parents, my friends, everyone was like, you don't need to go to Iceland to write a book. You can do it here on nights and weekends. This isn't necessary.
Wait. So what was the offer from Iceland?
Just that I would live in a cabin with some other artists. And they have a residency program over there. So there's visual artists and then there's writers too.
This is like that movie Midsummer.
Someone brought that up the other day and they were like, is that what Iceland was like? I was like, we didn't really run around,
I haven't even seen it. I watched the trailer and I was like, I want to see it, but I haven't seen it.
I actually liked it, but then, it is a little, it's a little whitewashed. Sure.
It's a little much.
It's a little white.
Is it?
Yeah. It's like, but, then I think the week before I left for Iceland, the residency emailed me and everyone dropped out. And it was just going to be me in this cabin for 30 days. And that's
actually better.
Well, you think that, but at first I was like, I'm going to get murdered. This is so weird. And also I thought I might go crazy because I'm pulled out of the American news cycle. I'm pulled out of everything.
Sounds good.
It kind of was. And, what a luxury, right? Like, what a privilege to be able to just say, like, I'm not going to be able to see CNN. I'm not going to be able to be on Twitter at the same hours of the day as everybody else. So I think it's actually funny because the book is distant from America, but it still feels American. It's still dealing with like issues of capitalism and things like this. But chronologically, I went to Iceland and the sun was going down for about 5 hours a day. So I feel like I was there for much longer than 30 days.
Where in Iceland are you?
I can't even pronounce the name of the town.
It's just like a million consonants.
Yeah, it was right on the edge of the Icelandic National Park. So I was really out. There were probably only like 50 people in the town, maybe.
What did it look like?
Beautiful. There was a lake, there was a mountain. Every night I would go. Eventually the locals got to know who I was, and at night they would let me come to the hot spring for free, which was really sweet. So I would wake up really early and just go straight to write, and then I'd hike, and it felt every day felt like 2 days, which was kind of very lucky. Yeah. And I think I've always had a full-time job. I've always been a working writer, and I think this was the first time I could apply my work ethic to writing and just get up and force myself to do it every day.
So how did you have to quit your job? Did you get some time off?
I used my income tax check and I saved up a lot of money, and then I decided to quit one job, and I had some severance and some vacation they had to pay out, and then I started a new job when I got back. So it really was, and it's similar to book tour. I just quit my job now. I'm gonna get another job that I start in a couple weeks. You kind of find these gaps and holes to make it happen.
So it wasn't like you went to your boss and were like, listen, I need to go to Iceland.
No. Because, it's hard for me because I think when I hear how it sounds, I kind of feel like it sounds so douchey. Like, oh, you went to Iceland and wrote a book. Like,
I think it sounds great.
I don't know. But I will say this, like, being by myself for that long and only being able to deal with the work and the landscape, all of that was, really important to this. And I think it showed me that I could write, because I think in my head I have a vision of a writer who is a little more disciplined than me and is constantly writing at all times. And I don't really know that that's the case.
Were you on the internet or your phone at all?
Barely. I mean, very lightly. I kept in touch with a couple people, but...
Did you read?
Yes. It was so funny. I packed one suitcase of clothes and the other suitcase was nothing but books and protein bars and coffee, because Iceland is super, super expensive. So someone told me bring as much food as you can. And I was really I got to a point where I was just eating a piece of bread and an egg every day and, cooking some chicken, because you're on an island. So the food is just so, so expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I came home in great shape.
Right. This is all sounding wonderful to me. It's like you're basically going on like a deep retreat.
Yeah.
And you didn't have really that much interaction with other people.
A little bit. I mean, I did go into the city a couple times. I made some friends. I was really excited because I'm not much for theater, but I went to see Icelandic theater in the first week that I was there. And it was crazy. I think Bjork's ex-husband did this crazy play, and it was nothing I had ever seen.
Like an Icelandic ex-husband?
Yeah, it was bananas. The first part was, physical dance. The second part was a play, and then the third part was a movie. And it was 6 hours long or something, and it was just like... it was the craziest shit I've ever seen in my life, and no one was Instagramming it, and there were kids in the audience. And so I really started to be kind of excited by this idea of just letting myself do whatever I wanted. And I actually feel like seeing that was, proof that it was okay.
That's actually really good to hear.
Yeah.
And probably, even better to actually lay eyes on.
Yeah, the opening act was a woman who was writhing in a pile of black rubber tubes and trying to claw her way out of it while other dancers used rubber to keep pulling her in. It was dark and strange and visceral, and I had never seen anything like it. It didn't feel like anything that would get made in America. I
don't think it would get made. Maybe some sort of fringe theater at Burning Man.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But so that was actually pretty formative. And I did, I learned a lot about Iceland and kind of what's been going on over there. It's a fascinating place, but more so, I think, for the nature.
It's good to travel. Mm-hmm. It's good to get out of the United States of America or wherever you live.
We're a noisy country. It felt really good to not have to have a hot take and not have to have an opinion on something, but also, again, there are so many people who don't get to step out of it.
Right. So that was the first time you really put words to page.
Yeah, I had pieces of it written that I brought with me. There were certain sections like Man Store, or there were different things that I had already written that I knew I wanted to incorporate. But the bulk of the narrative, I think I wrote 70,000 words in those 30 days.
Jesus.
Yeah, and then now, now the book is much shorter than that. I think it wouldn't even be. Most publishers would think it's not even a novel. I think it's 45,000 words now. But when I came home, it was a mess. It was a mess of a draft. But that gave me a little bit more hope about doing the next book, because now I understand you've got to make this messy thing and then clean it up. So then I think I probably edited for 3 or 4 years.
Okay, so then what did an average, if you did 70,000 words in 30 days, which is outrageous, what did an average work session look like in terms of length? You must not have been doing any editing in the moment. You were just going.
Yeah, I just went. And I think I was clocking between 1 and 5,000 words a day, I think, at that point.
And you had a relatively detailed outline that you were working from.
Sort of. Yeah, I would say so. But the meat quarry, everyone's like, where did that come from? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I was reading a book by Robert Olin Butler while I was there, and he was recommending that the minute you get out of bed, you go straight to write. You don't get coffee, you don't brush your teeth, you don't do anything. So I was just sort of every morning very haggard at a keyboard, and I think having my defenses down just let me make things that I think at another place, another time, I never would have let myself just make something so weird.
Well, and also I think I've heard the same argument, and it's not unconvincing, but you're also closest to dream state.
Yeah.
You go from REM sleep, whatever you're in at late stage of the sleep process, and you climb out of bed and you go to the keyboard, and maybe you carry some of that with you.
Yeah. I think too, for the meat quarry, it's I really wanted to talk about capitalism and how people make money in a rural area juxtaposed with the city, which is what comes in the second part of the book, without giving it a place and a time, right? If she's born a knot, that means none of the rules of a regular world apply. That means anything can happen. That's a new world. And so I didn't want her dad and her brother to be farmers or bankers or something that I would have to explain. You know what I mean? I wanted them to live in this kind of nebulous, timeless place. And, you really have to find a lot of ways to not talk about smartphones or technology. You have to find a way to remove all these markers in order for the audience to suspend, their disbelief long enough to go along with you. I think a lot about the movie The Lobster. You couldn't tell what year that was made in, right? There's a hotel and there's a forest and a diner. But that's it. And so, you could never say, oh, that was set in the 40s. That was set in, or in the future. You don't know.
How are they? This is Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
I've meant to watch it, but I haven't. It's how do they dress? I'm curious.
Well, they're all mostly in suits or very plain clothes.
Okay, yeah, because that would have to be the only visual marker I could think of that you would.
Yeah, I've been really interested in works of art that manage to be without time or place. I think that they're the most fascinating. But they're not easy to make, that's for damn sure.
And so for listeners who haven't read yet, you talk about the knot. Can you explain what that means with Cassie?
So the main character is born with her stomach tied in the shape of a knot. And it's sort of this deformity in her body that she has to live with. And, you know, her mother has a knot and her grandmother too. And that was really important to me because I wanted to get at the idea of like what we inherit and being like something being passed down to you that you have no control over. And so I think for her as a character, she's kind of born into this world very other. And I don't talk about this too much because I think it takes away some of the magic, but I think a lot about movies when I was a kid that inspired me, and I was thinking about when I saw E.T. and Edward Scissorhands and Harry and the Hendersons. These are all movies where someone different tried to become this, you know, part of society, and they never can stay, right? They can never stay in these worlds. They're too different. They're born other. And so her story, I think, you know, was really important to me to kind of hold true to the idea that she was never really going to fit in. But she struggles with her body and getting a job and being judged on how she looks and trying to date and you know, go grocery shopping and things like that. And alongside that, you know, she struggles with the pain of her body and surgery and all sorts of things. So, yeah, she's a character that is definitely sad. You know, I think she is a tragic character.
So, the Northern Lights. You're in Iceland. I gotta have you talk about this. This is like right up my alley. You're alone. You're in this incredible writing binge, you know, where you're getting 70,000 words in 30 days. But at some point, you saw the Aurora Borealis. Yeah.
So I woke up one night at like 1 a.m. and I wasn't doing this every night. But I did it this night. I was at the tail end of Northern Light seasons. It was very spotty if you'll ever get to see them. And I went into the national park, and no one tells you before that the Northern Lights come that the sky does a lot of weird things. And so I looked up, and it really looked like the stars had started moving like in a river. And then the sky just kind of, you know, cracked open, and the Northern Lights came out, and it was probably for like 5 or 7 minutes. And I was just sobbing. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And I was by myself. And I had thought, you know, after, you know, thinking about life and death, I've always been kind of not obsessed with death, but it's always just kind of lingering there, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And this was the first time when I saw the Northern Lights that I thought maybe death would be something kind of beautiful and would be bright and gorgeous and not this tragedy and full of pain. And so that really became kind of Cassie's ending to me, this idea of like transcendence, of leaving behind the body that caused you so much pain to go somewhere bright. And to me, the ending of the book, not to be a spoiler, but, you know, I do find beauty in that. You know, it is a tragedy and a grotesque, but I do think in the end, you know, she does transcend.
Yeah. And so you woke up at 1 a.m., just so I can paint a picture. You woke up at 1 a.m., like walked out into the national park at 1 a.m.?
Yeah, so, I mean, there were like some reports that there might be spottings of the Northern Lights, but I had been trying to see them almost the whole time I was there, and without any effect. And so I think this was maybe my last-ditch effort that, like, maybe I would get to see them. But, I mean, it's really hard. It's so funny. I think the New Yorker just did a piece on the tourism of trying to see the Northern Lights and how they're getting, like, busfuls of people. And, you know, they're paying a lot of money to be taken to see them, but, you know, you can't pay money to have access to a natural wonder that occurs at random.
Fantastic.
You know what I mean? And so it's kind of funny to see, now that I'm reading about it, I'm realizing how special it was that I was alone, because apparently now it's like all these tourist attractions and companies trying to make tourists feel comfortable about giving them money to be taken to maybe see something. Yeah.
That's a good business.
You can't, you know, it turns out you can't buy stars.
You can't buy the, I saw it once when I was a kid.
Did you?
In Indiana.
Whoa, yeah.
And it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was super amazing to see.
Did yours last long?
No, I mean, and then we were in high school, so we were like, whoa, you know, we didn't fully appreciate. But I did see it. I mean, the sky was definitely doing unusual things, and there were greens. And,
yeah.
You know, but your story's better.
You know, it's brilliant. It was beautiful. I feel lucky for it. But again, it's like...
It gave you the ending of your book.
Yeah, it's true.
Came from the heavens.
It's true, the heavens. The heavens did look down on me.
Was this at the end or towards the end?
Yeah, it was towards the end. I think I think I had like maybe a couple days left.
They should make a movie about you going to Iceland.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Iceland's a funky place, man. I like them.
I want to go.
I fuck with Iceland.
It's good.
I think I would go back. Also, the crazy part about it is it's the youngest Earth on the planet. So imagine if, you went to like Yosemite before anyone knew what it was, you know, and there's not any infrastructure. So there's just like next to every giant waterfall, there's like a tiny little rope with like a little sign that's like, don't go in there. You know what I mean? And it's like in America, you would be having like lawsuits left and right. But here it's like, you know, just please don't jump in this geyser.
I remember, I went skiing overseas. Not that I do this very often, but like, you know, years ago, I went skiing overseas, and I was comparing it because I went to college in Colorado. Mm-hmm. Colorado, you go skiing, there's like boundaries and don't go here and forbidden. And there it's sort of like ski at your own risk.
Good luck, dude.
Good luck. You might die. Yeah. And if you do, it's on you.
Yeah. No, Iceland was super fascinating, and mostly just because everywhere you go, it's a different landscape and different things are happening. Like within one day, it would be a hailstorm and then a rainbow. And then, you know, I'd go to a black beach where there were silver fish bodies all over the place. And, you know, there were parts of it that just didn't look like this planet, you know, for sure. It was definitely otherworldly. Yeah. And
like an untouchedness, I would guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you know, I didn't even explore. I mean, I think I've heard that you could spend, you know, a year there and still not see all of it, because when you think about the fjords and the highlands, I really only saw probably like a fourth or a fifth of that whole island, which is cool.
And you got back with this 70,000 word draft.
Yeah.
And it was a mess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because you had to, you know, obviously you write that fast, it's not going to be
pretty.
It's not going to be pretty, most likely. But it was also very dark.
Yeah, it was, I would say probably very, very hopeless. And I think only through like the editing process did it become lighter, for sure.
So, but like I took heart in this because I've written a draft of, many drafts of a book where I'm just like, ew.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is wrong with me?
Yeah,
like, there's nothing redeeming about this.
Totally.
It's just misery.
Yeah.
And you don't want to share that with people. And that's the right instinct, I think. Nobody wants to read that.
You know, I've really been struggling with this book because how do I stand beside something that is so gross and disgusting and magical and beautiful at the same time? It's hard. It's easier. It would be easier if this was a third-person narrative where a character I invented goes through some things, right? This feels much closer to me, so it's much harder to handle it, I think, in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you also, like, it's not just like an indictment of the art, but it's also personal. You're like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Like, this is what comes out of me.
Yeah.
Like, I need to get my shit together.
I frequently call this book my tumor while I was working on it, you know, because it is bits and pieces. I mean, I'm in there. I just, you know, I wouldn't tell you exactly where. I mean, I could tell you where, but...
Come on, tell me where.
I had a spine surgery after Tongue Party came out, which was the chapbook that came out when I was in graduate school, or it was my graduate school thesis. And I had written another collection that I was sending around. And then one day I woke up and I couldn't really walk anymore. And I had to move back in with my parents, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And this went on for like 7 months. I went to about 37 doctors.
No walking?
No, yeah. I mean, I was walking, but I couldn't go to work anymore. I couldn't drive. And later on, I found out that they couldn't believe I could still walk, which is kind of crazy. But I think, you know, a lot of that is in her surgeries. And after I had the back surgery, eventually... What was
wrong?
It turned out that I had the worst herniated disc they had seen in 35 years, and it was on all the nerve endings at the base of my spine, including my sciatic nerve. And I had started to lose control of my lower body. And so I think that's in her story for sure, to like all the doctors she goes to, the sugar water doctor, all of that. And so I think that's another reason that makes this book so hard is it's very personal, and it feels, you know, it's hard to put that out there, you know? It's easier to hide. It would be easier to hide.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least it's fiction. You got a little bit of cover, right?
Some cover, yeah. But yeah, you know, I came home with this messy draft, and it was very dark, and it made me really think about what do I want to put into the world, and also how can I be nicer to the reader? Because it becomes less about the darkness and more about how do I make sure that I'm not overwhelming someone so much that they don't want to read it.
Right.
But, you know, and so I think in the revision process, that's where I started to weave in, you know, more visions, more of the facts, just to give it some breathing room.
A couple puppies.
You know, yeah, because I make her fall in love, give her a friend, because fuck, it's like if you would have read the first narrative all the way through, you would have been like, okay, thank you for this. Like, I guess I'll just walk into the sea.
Right.
Thanks. But the other thing I do stand by is that is what life is, right? Life is beautiful, and then it's tragic, and then it's beautiful, and then it's tragic again, right?
And then it's funny.
And then it's
sad.
Yeah, and then it's disgusting.
Right.
And so I do think we're in a moment for the American novel. If you think about the 80s with Reagan, it was these very sentimental American novels, these heroes' journeys, where, and there's some really cool research being done into, the emotional contours of America. There's a book out now called The Hundreds by a researcher out of, I think it's published by Duke. And she's been doing a lot of looking at kind of what we're making during cultural moments. And when you look at Reagan, it's like we had all this hope about America, that things could get better in some cases. I mean, obviously we had the Brat Pack still operating, and there were, dissenting little pockets. But for the large part, what you saw in the books are, people getting better, redemption. And so I think what we're seeing now, if you look at like Ocean Vuong, if you look at a lot of the work that's coming out, Hunger by Roxane Gay, I think we're seeing a lot of books where things don't get better, and where we're just being honest about the fact that sometimes we don't pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and things, get a happy ending. And I do think that's very, in relation to the time, because it's hard to even have this conversation while all these terrible things are happening in America at all times, and people that I really care about are losing rights. And, it feels very strange to be on a kind of book tour while all that's happening. Or
to like write some sort of Horatio Alger story where it's like, hey guys, just buck up.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? How disingenuous is that? And it's like, I don't think I believe that a novel should be offering false hope. And my dad is, grew up, he was really into Reagan. And so it's very funny that this is the truth, but he keeps telling me, like, please just write a nice book, for fuck's sake. Just write something nice.
Sounds like my parents.
And I'm kind of sitting here going, what the fuck is nice right now? I would love for you to tell me what's nice.
Right.
Because it feels pretty bad.
Yeah. It feels objectively bad.
Yeah. It feels like the world's crumbling around us. And so I don't know, what does the reader want? If you want to escape, then this is maybe not your book,
I think, we're in some sort of spiritual crisis. We all need to see the Northern Lights. It's all we need. Go to Iceland.
Yeah, but, here's the thing. It's so hard to say that, because it's like, who could afford to do that, right? I got lucky and I saved up and I could go, but...
Jeff Bezos could underwrite all of us.
Oh, Bezos. Yeah, he could take all of us there, actually. It wouldn't even cost him much.
No, I was like, there's some Twitter feed where it's like...
things Jeff Bezos could do with his money?
Basically. Or it's like every day, I want to say every day or regularly, they're like, today Jeff Bezos did not end world hunger. Which is like, insinuating that he actually objectively could.
Yeah.
If he just cut a check. Maybe it's
true. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm not sure.
So you added a friend, you added a love story, you just added some light. That's the answer. So for people out there who might be working on a manuscript and might have, one of these like 70,000 word page piles that's just, just like basically like a misery bomb.
Add some light.
But,
I don't know. It feels very American, too, that we need these nice books, because I look at most of the books I love that are in translation, and it's like Camus wasn't walking around adding light. You know what I mean? Most of the great writers that I love were not in any way.
But The Stranger, the beach scene in The Stranger, I'm like, well, I kind of want to go there.
Yeah,
seems beautiful.
Little.
I want to go swim in the sea with this psychopath.
A little bit, yeah. But, I do. That's why I get so excited about reading, like Samantha Schweblin, Fever Dream. I love her work because, there isn't really a lot of light there either. Jenny Erpenbeck, another one, not a ton of light in those books, but they're still beautiful.
Some people can do it. Like the thing that you said earlier about how life is funny, then sad, sometimes sad and funny at the same time. It's dark and then it's light. That to me feels more honest.
Yeah.
I mean, there are episodes in life that are just pure darkness, and if you want to try to render that, go for it. But man, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
I feel like we got so much darkness to like in real life.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I struggle with, just personally. Like, no judgment on anybody else's work, but don't you ever think to yourself, like, I'm going to put this thing out in the world and it's going to just make people feel darker about, than they already do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially with this book, I'm like, what kind of hopelessness am I forwarding? But at the same time, if we ask what the job of art is, and I think this book wants to almost be sculptural, it almost doesn't want to be a novel, it wants to be a sculpture. What's the job of a great work of art? Is it to make us feel better or to make us ask questions?
It's to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable.
Okay, well, now that we solved that.
That's done. Moving on.
Moving on, next topic. But no, it's true, because when I think about the art that I love the most, it's not really resolving things for me. It's making me ask questions and look at things differently, but it's never saying, here's the answer, good luck. No one has the answer.
Right.
If we had the answer, then, we would have resolved a lot of things already.
But let's just continue the sculpture metaphor. Let's say there's this really magnificent, ornate, multifaceted sculpture. There would be shades of light. And even if it's the totality of it is menacing, there could be like a little winged angel over here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's like little gradations.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's been interesting about this book is I think you could look at it from many angles and facets. And so when I do interviews and talk about it, it's like, do you want to talk about surrealism? Do you want to talk about feminism? Do you want to talk about capitalism? Because death, life, love, sex, drinking, all of it's in there.
Right.
Bombs, wars, right? So I don't think it's an easy one,
So 5 years. You had a 70,000 word month in Iceland, and then 5 years later it comes out.
Yeah, so I edited it a lot, and I sent it out to 5 agents, which in retrospect, I was being a big baby, because the agents were like, this is beautiful, but we don't know what to do with it. We can't sell it. It's glistening. It's glittering, but we don't know where to put it on a shelf.
We love your voice.
Yeah, exactly. All those things that they say to you. And then,
how did you respond to that?
Oh, I cried like a baby, and then I, gave up, and I moved to San Francisco.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic.
I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to be a writer. And I took a job in tech, and I started working in Silicon Valley, and I think about 3 months into that, $2 radio, I almost had forgotten I had submitted it to them, and then they took it. And I remember being on the train home from work, and I got the email that they were accepting it, and I was... the train's moving, and I want to scream, I want to cry, I just am pacing because I can't believe it's actually going to happen. So I had a couple minutes where it felt really, really good, and then immediately
about 2?
Yeah, about 3 minutes. It felt great.
Good for you.
And then, thank you. And then immediately I really went insane on editing, and I think even and Blake Butler had read the very first draft, I think, or one of the first drafts. And then, when he sees it now, he's always like, this is a completely different book, because something happened when I knew they were going to publish it where all the jets turned on. I dumped the people I was dating. I just stopped doing anything but this book. And if you look at the stack of edits from, they accepted the book in September, and initially they wanted it to come out in March, which is why I went just completely psychotic.
It's like, this thing's going to be seen in public.
Yeah, and I had also been reading another book that they put out called The Deeper the Water, the Uglier the Fish, that I thought was so beautiful.
Yeah,
and
I talked to Katya in here.
I love her. I just saw her the other day, and I thought that book was just so beautiful, and I couldn't take it. And so I think reading that, and I was also reading a lot of Anne Carson and Brian Evanson. All of those people are very concerned with the line, where I think Katya was really concerned with, the structure of the fragments. So she gave me a lot of permission to just allow this to be like a mosaic style book. And then I think I probably revised it 7 times before it actually went to print in 3 or 4 months.
When were you doing it?
Oh,
you're
God,
working
nights
this
and
job.
weekends. I was up until 2 a.m. I seriously, I didn't sleep. I didn't do anything but, hem and haw over the lines, because I don't know if it feels this way for you, but the minute that it's going to come out, it's I have to make this the best thing it could possibly be.
Yeah, of course.
So, and during that is when the facts actually started to come in. I started to add in those lists of facts, because whenever I don't want to write, I start watching Planet Earth or Blue Planet. I just like to hide
his voice.
Yeah, it's so soothing.
Yeah. I love those. I try to fall asleep to those sometimes.
Yeah, they're really nice. But yeah, so I just went into a complete manic episode. I mean, it did get to the point where even $2 radio was like, you gotta stop,
tap the brakes.
You're going wild. They were like, it's good. You can stop.
And how does it feel now that it's out there?
I feel better. I think I lost my mind for about like the 3 months before it was coming out. I got really scared about how intimate it feels and how exposed I feel by it, But now I feel okay. Yeah. Mostly because the reception has been so good. And I think the coverage I've gotten from the blurbs, like when I say coverage, I mean cover. I think to put something this weird into the world, you need to have a lot of allies. And it's very funny because when I was on Bookworm yesterday, I was talking about this with Michael Silverblatt. He was talking about Doris Lessing putting her first book out and how, male critics really roasted her. And then he read the book and he was like, this is fucking brilliant. And like, you shouldn't be going through this, And so I think there is something where the book feels like a risk. It feels like unlike other books that are out right now. And so I'm hopeful that it means we can all be more experimental while still being like personal.
Do you feel like the vulnerability, I mean, it's always a vulnerable situation to be putting any book out into the world, whatever the contents happen to be. Mm-hmm. But you talk about how exposed you feel. Like, has the reception to the book focused on the personal? Like, have people come up to you and been like, oh my God, I didn't know?
Wow.
Or do people see it in the way that you worried they might?
I think the reception, I think people are being really kind not to ask too many insanely personal questions. When I first was on book tour for Tongue Party, I got a lot of Q&A questions that were like, why do you hate your dad? And I'm like, what? This is like fiction. I actually don't hate my dad. This so far has been good. I feel lucky for that, but I also think it might be because the book is such a blur. It's like I'm in there, but I'm not. I don't know how to describe it other than that.
Yeah, you're hidden.
Yeah, kind of. Obscured, yeah.
Obscured. So
yeah.
It's not like you mean, and you don't have to tell people.
Yeah, but at the same time, then they don't know why I'm so tied to it, And I wonder if it's like this for other writers, if I had written something that was more fabricated and removed from me. I keep thinking now, I'm like, I'm just going to go write a traditional romance novel.
I have that thought too, but like the truth is that I don't want books. I don't know. There's no rules. If somebody can really execute and I read it and it sticks, great. But like, I really like when I feel like there's blood on the page and it's like, okay, this is the person,
yeah.
There's something urgent that they have to say and they, there's a fearlessness in there,
yeah.
A willingness to sort of like, share.
I feel like it's kind of in a blender, like fiction, memoir, and nonfiction, really. Because if you look at any one page, it could be any of those things, because the facts are real. We went through like a lengthy fact process, and fact checking, and they were like, you got to cite your sources. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm citing sources in a fictional book, you know what I mean? But they're all real, most of them, I think. I'm pretty sure. But
that's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool that it could be any of those things.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Is that the kind of book that you like to read?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been reading, it's not out yet, but Carmen Maria Machado's In the Dream House.
I keep hearing good things.
So cool. It's really cool. I like that because it's fact, it's memoir, it's vignettes, it's art. I mean, it's dealing with so many different things. I just haven't read a book like it before, which is what makes me really excited. And I would say, too, that's really what I wanted to do with this book. I wanted to make something no one had made before because I feel like all those books about my grandmom died and she left me a spaghetti recipe and I make the recipe and I think of my grandmom. All that stuff exists. If you want it, the bookstore is full of it.
Right.
Right. If you want something different, then I probably have something for you.
Now that you mentioned Carmen, I'm thinking to when she was here and she was telling me about her writer retreat story, which, along with yours, probably ranks as two of the most memorable writer retreat stories that I've ever heard in conversation on the show.
Refresh my memory. Which one was hers? I know she had a couple.
Well, she was talking about the rabbit, if I'm remembering right, when she found half of a rabbit.
Oh God!
Outside of her, I think she was in Wyoming or something.
Yeah.
I'm pulling from my memory.
No. It sounds right. That sounds like Carmen.
not quite as like magisterial and inspiring as the Aurora Borealis, but still, that's
a big one. Yeah.
So you are from Philly,
mm-hmm.
Like life born and raised.
I'm from an hour outside of Philadelphia. I grew up next to a power plant called the Limerick Power Plant, Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Not a lot happening in that town, I would say, maybe.
Like a meat quarry?
No meat quarries.
No
No.
meat.
Although I would say maybe if you think about it, like the strangeness of nuclear energy, a lot of my friends' dads worked there. It was, it's sort of like the way prisons operate, right? They bring a lot of jobs. And so, the dads would go to work at weird hours and, that kind of thing.
Are you Italian?
Yeah, I'm Italian and a couple other things.
And a couple, okay.
Yeah,
I'm
kind of
Italian.
a mutt. Yeah.
So Philly, but outside of Philly.
Yeah.
And like childhood, interesting, good, bad?
Yeah, I think it was pretty okay. I mean, I definitely had, I was always writing. I was always making little books. My dad still has them. Like I would staple pieces of paper together and use crayons and make books. So I never stopped writing. But I mean, I was a bad kid. I was so bad. When I was 16, I was a hell ride. And I think my parents had almost kind of given up on me at that point because I was just being a total demon.
What were you doing?
Oh, God, everything. I remember this. They went to the movies one night, and I threw the biggest raging party you could ever imagine. And like
while they were at the movies?
Yeah, exactly. And they came home, and my mom was like, we were gone for 2 hours. And when I say they came home to just like kids everywhere. I mean, there was a gravity bong in the bathtub. It was just like out of control. It truly, when I look back on it, I'm like, Jesus Christ. But the one thing is, the whole time I was doing that, I was still in honors English. I was always reading. I was always writing. I was always making art. And by the time I got to college, I got over the whole kind of drug scene and like drinking.
So you got it out of your system early.
And I actually, looking back on it, when I got to school, all these kids were showing up like, wow, beer?
Yeah.
And I'm like, by that point I wasn't sober.
Where did you go to college?
Penn State University.
Oh, yeah, that's not an easy place to be sober.
No, I wasn't sober, but I was definitely done with, drugs and anything like that. So
what kind of, like, did you do like hallucinogens? And
yeah,
all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I was 16, 17 living in a town where not much was going on. And, I just fell into it. That's what all my friends were doing, and that's what I was doing. And it still strikes me how lucky I am that I got out and I got on this path,
Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a brother. He's 6 years younger.
Oh,
he's
younger.
an accountant.
Okay.
Yeah, I love him. He's great.
Okay.
Yeah,
But you didn't have I was thinking you had like an older sibling who might have like exposed you to things. But
no, I was the bad kid. And it's so funny because my brother went completely the opposite way. It's like he looked at me being a train wreck and was like, I'm just going to keep my shit straight.
That kind of thing happened a little bit to my little sister.
Yeah?
Just because like she was really little when I was throwing house parties and she was exposed to a lot. My older sister didn't expose me to much at all.
Yeah.
I'm caught between two girls.
Yeah.
But like my younger sister saw me go wild and then go off to college and like grow my hair out and drop acid and be an idiot, and she I hopefully learned from that.
You would hope.
You would hope.
Yeah, my brother definitely did. I went to Penn State, and that's where I started to do a lot of writing for research publications, and I was interviewing scientists at Penn State about their projects and what they were working on. And then I was also working backstage in a music venue, so I was meeting all these crazy musicians.
Like who?
Oh, Prince.
You met him?
Well, I mean, the meeting is hard because, he laid eyes on me. And, his manager introduced me because I was like setting up his microphone or something. I was just like, doing stagehand stuff. And he just kind of looked me in the eyes and then gave me the once over and nodded. And that was it.
That was it.
No, there was no conversation
was
or anything.
Was there warmth?
Yeah, it seemed warm, but to this day, I'm like, was I being dismissed? Was he approving of me? I don't know. But yeah, I was always like crazy about music. I was like, helping Guar set up shows. And like, yeah, my music days were just really crazy. I followed Tool up the East Coast for like 3 weeks. I was a maniac. I was a true maniac. And then, I just started focusing on the writing. And when I got out of college, I was starting to become a waitress at Maggiano's because I didn't know if I was going to get a job. And so I was learning how to like pour wine at Maggiano's. And it turned out that I had gotten a job to be a prison reporter in Boston. And I found out in the middle of the training, like they called me and said, we want you to come do this. And, I quit. It was, one of those days where I was like, holy shit. And I literally like put down, the basket of breadsticks I was learning how to serve and said, I'm moving to Boston. I'm going to be a prison reporter. And I did it by myself. And so for 3 years, they would send me into jails and prisons, and I would interview inmates. And I was really focused on trying to write about recidivism programs, what was working and what wasn't. But that was...
Why this? Was it just the beat that they gave you?
It was just the job I got. And, it was... I had always wanted to be like a reporter for Rolling Stone, but it was, the internet had popped off and... Isn't that because like I was kind of the same way. Yeah.
At like the long form journalists of yore, where you're like, wow, this would be amazing. And then the internet just obliterated all that.
Yeah.
It seems like.
It did. And so I was just happy to have a job that was a writing job. But I was 23 and they were having me interview people in solitary confinement.
And what was that like?
I mean, it was terrifying and it was crazy, and it gave me so much empathy. And I think after about 3 years of that, I realized, by the numbers, how insanely fucked our prison system is. And so that's when I came back to, Pennsylvania, and I became the editor-in-chief of a business journal kind of style pub, and then I got my MFA at night.
Where at?
Rosemont College, which is a really small school. I had actually gotten into Columbia, but I couldn't afford to go. I remember my dad sitting me down saying, like, you're going to be in debt for the rest of your life if you do this. And so I do always want to talk about the economy of being a writer, because it's not easy, but you can still do it without, I think working full time and getting my MFA at night, I think I spent $8,000 on my MFA total. The rest of it I just paid out of pocket as I went. But I never came from like a place where it was going to be feasible for me to go 6 figures into debt over an education and hope to write a book.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. And I think, my heart breaks because it's like, she should go to Columbia. You got in. They should pay for you to go, or there should be money somehow. It makes me frustrated. But I think about this a lot when I look back on my MFA experience. I was lucky. I was like the lucky bastard whose like parents were like, we'll put you through graduate school.
Right.
So I went.
Yeah.
I didn't think at the time enough about like people getting like a poetry MFA.
Yeah. And
going like 70, 80, 90, $100,000 in debt.
Yep.
To learn how to write better poetry.
Yeah.
Which, like, look, I do not condemn or like have like really strong negative feelings toward the MFA program. Like, people need to go find places to write wherever it is, and community wherever they can find it. So there's arguments for and against, but the financial situation that you're in or that you're up against, like, some practical thinking about it is totally logical and defensible.
Yeah.
So it's like, because like really, like you would be, your dad was like looking out for you. Like if you had just said, I'm going to Columbia, like what if you're sitting here hanging with $100,000 hanging over your head?
It's so true. And I think so much about, I'm so concerned about how we're teaching people it looks to be a writer. And that's why when I talk about Iceland, it feels complicated for me, because I don't come from money, and so the amount of money it cost me to go there, it probably cost $3,000 total, like just with the flight and the food and all of that. And I was very lucky to do it, but I don't come from that. It's not normal to me to have good things happen or to have the kind of money to be able to do that. The other thing that I would say is, for me with the MFA, it was kind of better that I couldn't go somewhere like Columbia, because I think I was able to maintain being weird and write kind of outside the MFA. I think I would have probably been trained to write a way that this comes a little bit more organically than if I had sat in a room and had, some master fiction writer teach me how to write, because I didn't study with anyone famous.
Well, I think it's that, but I also think it is the people that you're in class with, and that their work, like people, there's the teacher's influence, but there's also the fellow student influence, and like how people can get, there's a lot of like mimicry, and some of it's natural. You're going to influence one another, but I get that. Like you're sort of like out on the periphery a little bit. Like, I didn't even know Rosemont had an MFA program.
Well, the MFA was really fascinating for me because everyone was sort of writing traditional fiction, and I was showing up with these very surreal, weird stories. And so every workshop was sort of terrifying. And it was only when one professor from Temple realized what I was trying to do, and he started funneling me really weird work, like, Donald Bartholomew and early Ben Marcus, like The Age of Wire and String. He started to just feed me the contemporary, modern, odd, surreal things that made me realize I wasn't by myself. And up until that point, I had felt very much by myself. I had felt super alone because everyone else was writing these sort of pristine, traditional narratives, and I was showing up with stories about dead koalas watching up on a beach, and people would just sit in the class and go, is the character on LSD? That's the only way this makes sense.
Was the character on LSD?
No. And so I think this whole process of writing, it takes a lot to allow yourself to be yourself on the page because, everybody else, the one downside of the MFA is we create a sort of, what is it, a flat line or like a middle road where we're teaching each other how to write. The question could be, is that a necessary? It's not a formula.
Yeah,
it sure isn't.
I mean, and I think I'm like the thing that keeps coming to mind is how good of a teacher you had to give you that kind of bespoke nudge. Yeah, that's what a teacher should do.
Yeah, you would hope. Yeah.
Instead of being like, "Hey, do it this way," be like, "Oh, this is what you're naturally expressing. Let's see if we can
feed you more,
help her along."
Yeah, yeah. So I think without him, I probably would have just quit writing.
So, does the body? Is it like the body is obviously a huge concern in your book? Mm-hmm. Is it a huge concern in your work in general? Is it something that you feel like is like we all have themes,
Yeah, of course.
That we're going to sort of carry through. Do you feel like that's one of the core themes?
I guess so. And it's so funny because other people see it and I don't because I'm just kind of day-to-day writing things. But I guess I am sort of obsessed with the visceral and also what it can signify for us because it can mean so much. It's like you could explore the body for the rest of your life. It does beautiful things and horrible things, and it can turn on you or it can make you feel great. So I think I'm endlessly fascinated by it. It's like outer space, the human brain, the deep sea. These are like three things that we know so little about still. And so I think they're really ripe for exploration and for playing and understanding. And then especially just, the female body, it is weird. It is grotesque. It is partially disgusting, right? Like, just think about childbirth.
I've seen it twice.
Yeah. And would you describe it as both beautiful and horrific?
Yeah. No, it's bizarre. And we had 5 miscarriages.
Oh, Jesus.
So, I've been through that.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've been through that. My son was born. He's disabled.
Yeah.
So, I'm right there with you on the body.
Yeah. And it's crazy, too, because especially with miscarriage, no one knows about it.
No, yeah, it's a weird grief. You almost don't feel entitled to feel grief about it because it's like, oh, whatever. And, frankly, I hear a lot of this or read a lot of this. It's weird because, when I'm reading Twitter or I'm online, there are always essays about, miscarriage grief. Mm-hmm. And, there's somebody who had a miscarriage who writes, a beautiful, wrenching essay about the grief. But then whenever there's debate about choice, it's it's not even a fucking kid until 20 weeks. And you're just I'm yeah, I get it. I do. I sort of get it biologically. And, I'm pro-choice. But at the same time, I'm like, man.
The way it felt.
For me, it felt hard.
Horrible.
Yeah. Horrible. And, increasingly, with each one, it gets more and more anxious and, heartbreaking. And for me, it was a real grief. And I think for my wife especially. Her body was the one that was, she was suffering it bodily.
Yeah.
But then I have friends who have had one. And they're just like, yeah, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm a pussy.
Yeah, it's funny too because I think one thing that is core of this book, and I think it goes to what you're saying, I can't go on, I'll go on, right? We're all carrying so much pain and we don't talk about it, you don't go to work and say, hey guys, I had a miscarriage yesterday. I'm going to be a little bit off my game.
I'm kind of the guy who almost would. And then people just get weird.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. I've noticed that, and this is hard, but I think natural. I wrestle with it, but I feel like I have some understanding and forgiveness about it. But, since my son was diagnosed, I've heard from friends of mine less and not more. People retreat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh. That's,
that's a killer.
And look, there have been many people who have, rallied and been there. But people that I would not have expected to sort of vanish.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not because they're vicious or cold. I think it's just uncomfortable.
They don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do.
Well, when I had spine surgery, same thing. I went from being the most popular girl in Philadelphia to like 3 people came to see me in 6 months. You know?
And you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Where'd you go? Where'd you all go?
See, this is the thing, though. I don't think it's like, I think people need, like I tell myself this, like, you have to be forgiving. People are not trying to be hurtful.
Right.
They are self-absorbed in the way that I am often self-absorbed. I miss things.
Yeah.
Like for every you think about all these people who didn't come to visit, or all these people who haven't bothered to call or check in, or, like, who knows what's going on in their
they
weird
have lives
brain.
too, and that is really what I'm saying. We're all carrying so much, and I think too, one of the things I'm kind of wrestling with when we talk about how do you keep having a day-to-day life when these like tragedies pop up for you, I'm without getting on a soapbox, it's almost a requirement of capitalism that we pretend we're okay, and that we keep going to work, and that we put on the face. And I do think it's not natural. I do think it's natural to grieve when there's a miscarriage, or to grieve when there's a diagnosis, or to grieve when your body hurts for a very long time and then you have like a major surgery.
Yeah.
Those are all very heavy things. But one of the constructs of living in capitalism is that we have to keep being part of the wheel. We have to keep going to work. We can't, and so that's kind of crazy. If you think about how big you feel and how much grief you feel and how much it hurts, and then you still have to get up the next day and force yourself to keep going. And it's like, that's good in some ways because it doesn't allow you to just completely spiral out. But in other ways, we're all faking it then. That means everyone I meet is doing the same thing I am.
Right.
For the most cases. Unless you meet, the people who have been lucky enough to be unscathed by tragedy.
Well, they'll get theirs eventually.
Yeah. I mean, some people don't, Some people have great simple lives and nothing bad happens to them.
Well, but eventually you live long enough, shit's going to happen. Like, you're going to get sick and die.
Yeah.
So it's like nobody gets out alive.
Right.
But I do think, because I think about this too, because I can, you can get into self-pity when shit goes sideways.
Right.
Like, my spine, my son, my miscarriages. Like, but I've been super, super lucky in a lot of other ways.
Same.
And there's always the light and the dark and the good and the bad and the luck and the bad luck. But some people draw much tougher hands than others.
Very much so. And I think that's something that we need to really start putting back into the American narrative is that, I'm lucky every day. I've had a lot of physical pain. I've had some like economic stuff and, whatever, but I don't have it half as bad as so many people, And so if anything, I hope that a book like this would inspire empathy for others, and that when you meet someone, maybe you think, hey, they could really be going through some shit, and they might not be their best right now, but like there could be more happening than I even realize.
There almost always is, and even if there's not, like, I think about this because it's very easy to slip up. Like, I had a Lyft driver yesterday driving me to a work thing, and I was like tense because I had to be there. I was running late. It was like a remote interview in a studio. I had to go, and like it was starting.
Yeah.
And so I was like in kind of a, like, not pushy, but I was just like, you got to take this route. You got to take this route. I'm going to guide you. Don't look at your GPS. I know how to get there, kind of thing. And so I was like, go up to this corner and take a left. He goes over the corner and goes straight. I was like, dude, I was like, turn around. I was like, whoa, turn around. You got to go left. And I think he was like, he spoke semi-English. Yeah. And so then he comes back, he turns around and then goes left at the intersection when he should have gone right. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. And I was like, dude, I finally was like, we straightened out. We started going the right way. And then I was just like, I'm sorry. And he was like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I just caught myself and I was like, you know what? It's early in the morning. This guy's driving a Lyft.
Yeah.
God knows how. Maybe he's been on since 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Or he just started and he's working 2 jobs and he's fucking tired. Like, you don't know.
Yeah. Could we just all be nicer to each other? I mean, especially I see it in like in San Francisco. What you have there is a lot of people with a lot of money juxtaposed against a lot of people with nothing or gig work, and like the rudeness and the unfeelingness is just abominable. You know, it's just terrible. And so I do hope that we could all just like maybe chill the fuck out and be nicer to each other, but
also there also has to be some structural, like major structural, economic, and spiritual shifts. Well, it's unsustainable. The inequality and the isolation and the environmental destruction, it's unsustainable.
I talk about this all the time. It's crazy that before they released Splenda, they had to test it for 10 years. But the internet, they were just like, go. And now it's like we're working on a pill to cure loneliness because we found the part of the brain that where loneliness comes from. And it's like, whoa, wait, maybe we just should stop creating apps that remove the need for us to talk to each other. No, but I'm saying like we're creating a society where a certain level of economic class will be able to exist without interacting with their surroundings or with other people. I mean, I see it in the condos in San Francisco. Most of the ones that, you know, the tech kids live in are like laundry on site, bar on site, restaurant on site, gym on site, and then like happy hours every night so they can meet each other. What city are you living in then? Everything you need is right there. You never have to leave. How are you engaging with your community? How are you building with other people? How are you meeting anyone who doesn't look exactly like you? Or
work exactly like you.
You're not. You know? And so that's something that, you know, watching it, especially living in San Francisco, watching that happen, it makes me a little scared for the future because, and this is in sharp contrast to New York, the train in San Francisco is dead silent. Everyone has headphones on. No one looks at each other. There's just no conversation at all. And that has been that way for the entire year I've been there.
Really?
Yeah.
Whereas in New York, it's more conversation.
There's something going on. You know what I mean? Like, and I'll say it's different
there's like a drum line.
Yeah, it's different I'm talking about Caltrain specifically, which is the train that takes you to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
BART is a little bit different. BART, you know, anything goes.
Yeah.
But it does make me think a lot about how we have really removed the need to interact with each other at all. And it's kind of a downer. It's super a downer.
I think about this. I feel fairly isolated socially in a way that I think is totally common. I have a family life and I'm always around people unless like my wife takes the kids away for the weekend, in which case I'm just like, this is fucking great. I'm just going to sleep and be quiet, you know? So it's not that I don't have interaction with other humans. They just happen to be my family.
Right.
But like buddies, most middle-aged men I know don't do much socially.
Right.
The women, the moms, do get together to their credit, and they do provide social support in a way that I envy. Yeah. It comes more naturally to women.
Yeah, I think it's like, I've noticed this with female friends, and, you know, I would say even in support of this book, it's like, women rally around each other because it's safer, because the odds that a woman is going to like harass you or do something to make you feel terrible is much lower. And so it's like you have to keep those friendships because it makes you feel more sane. It makes you feel like you do have a place that you can go where like someone's not going to hurt you, which, you know, that's what you hope for anyway, you know.
Yeah. Good friends. Friendships are important. I'm always thinking like I got to be better. I got to be better about like cultivating and maintaining and strengthening and just like being a good friend.
I've been on book tour with Tommy Pico, who's a poet that I really love, and he was talking about how he made a pact with himself, and he picked a couple friends where he was like, we can no longer break plans. Right? Because it's so easy now with the phone to feel like you're in touch with everyone, but you're in touch with no one.
Right.
And like the downside of technology is the human brain needs to see other humans and be acknowledged. Like in the morning, to have someone look at you and say good morning is a reaffirmation that you exist. And when we lose that, something starts to kind of unravel and get a little gooey, you know? And so I think it is about kind of holding each other accountable for not just being a text friend. You know, and saying like, hey, no, I need this time. I need to see another person.
I don't like flaking.
I know. I hate it.
Fuck flaking.
It's gotten so much easier though now. And now you almost expect it. You know, you're like.
No, and then like I'm like old school. Like I'm an on time guy.
Mm-hmm.
If I tell you I'm going to be somewhere, I'm there.
Yeah.
I don't flake.
Yeah.
And then people flake, and I'm like, I'll get pissed. I'll be like, dude,
You're flaking.
And then it's like, dude, why are you pissed about someone flaking?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
They get mad at you for getting mad at them.
And
you're
like, no, but it's like uncool to not be cool with flaking. And I'm like, I don't think this is a healthy evolution.
Yeah, this shouldn't work like this.
No, this is a de-evolution. I think that I have this right. There's integrity in being on time for people. There's integrity in keeping your word. Like, these are simple things.
And also the importance of having a face-to-face conversation. Like, I wonder now how many fewer words we're speaking per day than, our ancestors were, or my parents, because I can go for days without speaking now, because...
I had the same thought the other day. I was like, wow, I haven't talked to anybody since Friday.
That's insane.
And it was like Sunday night.
Yeah.
Not that long, but still.
But no, that's pretty hefty. And so there's a way in which I think we're like allowing technology to let us disappear that I don't know if, I'm kind of working on a book around this now, but I'm kind of fascinated by it, especially just after everything I've seen in San Francisco. If we're to believe San Francisco is the future, which is maybe true, it's not giving me a lot of hope.
Well, it's such a beautiful place, and I have so much romance. When I think of it, there's so much romance to San Francisco, like its history. I love the whole 60s San Francisco thing as an idea.
Yeah.
But it is also, to me, like the most extreme and concentrated example of how like the 60s boomer generation, and I guess, but it's also younger generation. I mean, like a lot of this money and capital is being driven by non-boomers.
Right.
But it just feels like it went from being sort of this great, groovy, affordable polyglot of a city to being something that's been just corrupted by wealth.
I call it a fault line. I mean, I'm paying, and this has been really hard coming from Philadelphia and not coming from money. The amount of rent I'm paying breaks my heart every month. But beyond that, it's the amount of suffering. It's that every day I leave my house and someone is sleeping on the sidewalk and bleeding.
Me too.
And
me too.
I can't. And it's like people are like, oh, it's bad in other cities. There is nothing as bad as what I have seen in San Francisco. It is on every block. It is on every street. It does not have, it's not contained in any way. And it shouldn't be. Honestly, should it be? Probably not. Because in reality, like, this is a problem that we're not fixing. And fuck us for not fixing it. Like, I'm moving to Austin in like 20 days because this is the least ethical I've ever felt living anywhere. To every day wake up and go to my dumb job in Silicon Valley, and the homelessness extends all the way down to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
There's homeless people on the edge of the Google campus where my office is located.
My God, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm walking around going, does everyone in this city have Stockholm syndrome? Because they're all telling me like it's not that bad. Well, it's not that expensive. It's not that big of a problem. I'm like, I go to the gym in the morning and I have to walk by someone who's literally vomiting blood out of their mouth, and I can't understand how all of us are just letting it happen.
Right. But then it's also like, because I'm the same way. I ride my bike around. I ride my bike a lot. So I think like maybe when you're not in a car, if you're on foot or you're on a bike, you're more in touch. Like if you're encased in your Tesla,
yeah,
you're
it's
like,
harder to see.
It's like I can't hear anything in this soundproof electronic vehicle
Bingo.
that goes 0 to
Bingo.
70 in 2 seconds. Like,
yeah.
But I just will have like more human to human interaction. I'll be at a red light and I'll just be like looking over, and the homeless woman pushing her cart will be like, I'm going to see Jesus, and she's walking to the church, and then I'll see a guy pooping.
Yeah.
I'll see somebody just filthy sleeping and they're completely covered by a blanket, and I'm like, are they dead? And this is like every day. Yeah. And I think people who don't live in major cities, maybe especially in like California because of the nice weather.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people come here just because it's like a little bit less painful to be homeless.
Right.
Or because the cost of living is so high, there's more homeless people.
I was going to say, I mean, it was really hard. I was watching a little bit of a video for a program in San Francisco that's attempting to help the homeless. And one of the men was like, the biggest joke here is all of you are 2 paychecks away from being me. And I was you. And all it took was, 1 or 2 things to go wrong. And this is what my life turned into. And, I don't know what the answer is. But I know that when I look at, I did some work with a homeless shelter in Philadelphia, and it called the Bethesda Project, and we volunteered there for a little bit. And that program, I think, is housing, thousands of people who otherwise would be on the street. And, for San Francisco, where they're not allowing kind of new construction in certain areas, they're not creating a solution to this problem. And, I can't just blame the city, obviously, but if the taxes are this high and you're not helping your people at all, then something's wrong. Something's not adding up. If you're the richest and most expensive city in America and you can't figure out how to help these people, then either that money's going somewhere it shouldn't, or your priorities are in the wrong place, because it is truly devastating, and it is...
And growing.
Yeah.
I heard the other day on NPR, I want to say the homeless population in LA went up by 10% last year.
Yeah.
And in Oakland, it went up, I want to say something like 22.
It's crazy. I had someone, who was sharing some research with me, and they said, homelessness in San Francisco went down by 13%. And it turned out the study that they were citing had decided to count tents as homes. And I was like, how nice for you to fudge these numbers by pretending that a tent is a house so that you can tell yourself this problem isn't getting worse. It's insane.
Well, plus, because people, I want to say the ACLU argued a case in Los Angeles that made it legal for people who are homeless to put up a tent on any sidewalk, to camp anywhere that's not a residential neighborhood, but it's like city, commercial districts, whatever, as long as they can put a tent up after sundown, and they have to be up by sunrise. But of course, who's going to police that?
Yeah.
But it just feels unsustainable. Because, you're like, oh my God, how can we have tent cities everywhere? And I'm taking my daughter to her friend's house, and it just feels like
wrong. It's
wrong and a massive problem, and it's going to require leadership and sacrifice.
Well, also some kind of innovative thinking. It's why are we so excited to put innovation into apps rather than finding new ways to solve humanitarian issues, right? That's what kills me, is we've decided to dedicate let's go to Mars. Yeah. Why don't we do that? Instead, why don't we figure out how to make a car that drives itself instead of figuring out how to sustainably house the homeless, who I would argue, many are just dealing with mental health issues. There was a ruling, I think in the 70s, and it was probably the one thing I think the ACLU did that I, kind of don't agree with now in retrospect, where you can't be kept in a mental institution if you're being treated and the medication is working. And you can see it when the minute this happened, there's this direct spike in the prison population and the homeless population, because the offshoot of taking, schizophrenia medication is that it convinces you that you're doing okay. And then you kind of have these people who are put back out into the world without a support system or the ability to buy the drugs. And so, the homelessness in San Francisco looks quite different from any other homelessness that I've seen, because to me, it's more frequently mental health issues than it is alcoholism and even drug abuse.
Yeah.
It far more feels like I'm seeing schizophrenia. And so that makes me even more angry that we're not doing something about it.
Well, I'm right there with you. You're a very empathetic person.
Turns out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's so funny. One of my favorite facts is that an octopus has 3 hearts. And I remember writing a story about, a woman that had 3 hearts, and how you'd be so empathetic you wouldn't even be able to walk down the street,
Right. Well, that it puts you to the test if you're actually looking and actually seeing people.
Yeah.
It is weird how you can desensitize. I think it's this survival mechanism, but it's not the answer. We have to look, and we have to collectively deal with the reality. And it's also you paid $4 million for your house in Pack Heights or whatever it is. Why you want to live like this? Come on.
It's past looking. It's more about doing. And I think that's one thing that I hope is the next phase of America, because I think right now we're in a very comfortable place of I protest on Saturdays and then I go to brunch. I march at night. And I don't care what happens to the homeless. We need to really start thinking about how we can change things in a tangible way, because it's all well and good that we're having a conversation right now, but I'm very hungry for action. I want somebody to do something. How many op-eds are we going to write before?
A lot.
You know?
Yeah.
And we hear ourselves having this conversation, but we're still having it. We've been having it. And it's the same thing. I feel like, I felt this way after the Women's March. Like, I went to D.C. and I was so amped. And it's like they still defunded Planned Parenthood the very next day. And so I look at France and I look at Puerto Rico and I look at, what's happening in Hawaii. And you see these other, cultural movements where people are not afraid to say, I'm not going to work until you do the right thing. I'm not going to work until this changes. And you see them halting the wheels of capitalism, like laying down on the train so that nobody works. And I there's something about me that really envies that, because I don't really see the same thing here.
It's because we're too comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people are disengaged. I feel like I get frustrated. I've had conversations about this. Like, I follow politics. I'm pretty engaged and I don't know if fixated is the word, but like paying attention and feeling good about paying attention, feeling like that's justifiable.
Right.
We need people paying attention, but like I feel like there's too much like detachment, and like again I feel like this sense of like, well, that's uncool. I'm not going to talk about that or tweet about that or Facebook about that. I don't want to deal with it. And I'm like, guys, like we gotta pay, like especially smart, like bookish people with good expressive abilities. Like we need people communicating.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard because I was reading some research about how social media is good for organizing, but it's bad because it also makes us feel like we're doing something when we're not.
Right.
It's easy to go bitch on Facebook. It's harder to say, I'm not going to go to work until everyone has housing, or I'm not going to go to work until we impeach somebody that probably shouldn't be in office. I
think people would do it. I think there's just not that collective sense. You don't want to be the only jackass who's like, I just got fired.
Absolutely. But it's really hard because if you even look when people say like we're going to have a walkout or whatever, most of those things are happening in very small chunks at schools. You see teachers doing that. And so I don't know what it's going to take. I had interviewed when I was very young. I interviewed Noam Chomsky, and I was asking him about the way in which protest has changed. And I think it's very different what happened for Vietnam. And I don't feel that our protests today are the same at all. I think we've really put them in a convenience bucket. When is it convenient for me to show up without losing my job?
Is there an app for that? Can we just get
can we get an app for how to stand up against all this bullshit?
I want to have a car that protests for me.
It's a good question though, because it does feel, but then you look at Puerto Rico and you see it can work. It can work. And pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That, not quick.
And Hong Kong too.
Yeah. Nothing's quick, but that was a couple weeks long.
It's about volume and consistency.
Yeah.
If enough people show up and don't leave, then the government will respond because they will be terrified of the people. And that's the way it should work, right?
Yeah, you would
the
hope.
Government should be afraid of the people, not the people afraid of the government.
Not vice versa, yeah.
Well,
but, I hope that more of us find each other and that we, find ways to be more actionable and, less, even though I'm a writer, less chatty about it and more ass in the street kind of thing.
Cool. Well, I've loved talking to you.
Hey, you too.
Congratulations on your book.
Hey, thanks.
And good luck on, what are you working on now?
Novel and a short story collection. Novel first. But it's kind of a Joan Didion in Silicon Valley. It's
dead koalas washing up on.
There is surrealism in it. But yeah, it's definitely going to be I hope a good one. I hope a banger.
All right. Well, good talking to you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, guys, there you go. That's Sarah Rose Etter, and her debut novel is called The Book of X. It is available from $2 Radio. Sarah Rose Etter, The Book of X. Go get your copy right now. You can find Sarah Rose Etter online at sarahroseetter.com. She's on Facebook. She's on Instagram. You can follow her on Twitter at Sarah Rose Etter. Track her down, get her novel. Thanks to Kill Rock Stars and the band Stereo Total for the theme song music as always. Thanks to Tiger in My Tank for the interstitial music. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you want to write to me, the email address is letters@otherppl.com. Tell me what you think. Tell me a story. Share your vision. Don't forget that the Other People podcast has its own official app, the Other People with Brad Listi app. It's free. It's available where you get your apps. Go get the app. It's free. Next week on the program, Juliet Escoria, author of Juliet the Maniac. Been waiting for this one. Get excited. It's coming. Oh my God.